Hey everyone, it's Keela here for Soy and Shea, and thank you so much for joining me for today's video where I'm going to take you along and make the first batch of body butters for the season. With my body butter recipe, I have been working on this really hard for the last couple of years to try and combat some of the concerns that people have about body butter. From a customer's point of view, people are often concerned about how greasy it is, that it's hard to wash off the body or doesn't feel nice when you go to have a shower after applying body butter in the morning, and also that it can potentially stain clothes. And I've been working on ways to try and combat this. Now, one of the things I put in mind to try and alleviate some of that greasiness is some tapioca starch, and the other thing that I started adding a couple of years ago was some emulsifying wax. There's still no water in this product, so it is a oil-based body butter, but the emulsifying wax really helps to reduce some of that greasy feel, makes it easier to apply to the skin. And then not only that, when it comes time to actually doing washing, say you've applied your body butter to your legs and your arms, you want to wash it off your hands, that emulsifying wax will help the oils and butters that are on your hands to emulsify with the water and wash off easily. This also means that when you've got excess body butter on your clothes, when you put it through the wash, again, it's going to emulsify and come out of the clothes easily without actually staining. So the emulsifier is great for that. I also discovered that by putting an emulsifier into the body butter, it does add a little bit of structure and a little bit more stiffness to the mix, and it has enabled me to be able to sell my body butter much earlier in the season. So generally, depending upon what the weather is doing, I can bring it out in about mid-autumn rather than late autumn, and I can also sell it into about early to mid-spring, whereas I used to have to stop selling it at the end of winter. Now, for those of you who are creators, don't get too excited about your summers. At the end of the day, you are not going to be able to make a body butter that is just oils and butters that can be sold in summer, because this product has a really low melt point. We want it to melt on the skin, and our skin is often at a melt or a heat which is less than the summer temperature. So this is always going to melt in summer no matter what you do, but it does give you that little bit of extended life to be able to sell the products through. Once this is in the bathroom in summer, it will still stay solid, but you won't be able to take it to markets or ship it to sell it in summer. So try and get it sold out in that spring so people have got it over summer, for those that like their body butters even in summer. Now, before we actually do get stuck into making this, for those that are interested in the recipe, I have put this for sale over on the Pimp My Soap website, and there are links down in the description box so you can go and purchase this recipe. Or I have also shared this recipe over on Patreon as a revised recipe to my normal body butter. Now, if you are joining Patreon, there are some levels that you need to be considerate about. It's on the $5 level for 3 months, so that is for May, June and July. It will be on the $10 level for that May, June, July, August, September and October. After those months, it moves into the vault. So if you are watching this video after May, double check in the description box what level you need to join at to go and get that recipe, or just go head straight over to the Pimp My Soap page and purchase it there. On the recipe, I do have ideas for alternative ingredients that you can use, and also information about why certain ingredients are included in this. And I also tell you ways that you can actually change this up to make it either more budget friendly or more luxurious as well. I think that is enough yakking for now. Let's go and see how I make my whipped body butter. Let's go. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is start to weigh out all of our oils and butters into a pan. With my oils and butters, I do tend to use the unrefined ones just to get the most sort of benefits, vitamins and things like that from out of them. But they do add a slight smell to the overall product, so just be aware of that. So we're going to start off with our shea butter. Right, next up is some cocoa butter. This is one of the Barocca Shea cocoa butters and it smells delicious. I'm just going to pop it on the side here to see how much I've got until I get the right amount there. Just another little piece. Oh. And the last butter that I put into mine is mango butter. Now with this recipe, I give you the three sort of most common butters that are available all over the place, but it is really, really easy to swap them out as long as you're swapping them like for like. So if you're taking cocoa butter out, you'd probably want to use cocoa butter because they have a similar melt point, similar sort of texture, heaviness, and all the rest of it. So to make this a little bit easier on the skin, we're now going to add in our liquid oils. Now the oils that I do provide on the recipe, again, they can be easily swapped for any others that you want to use. Now because this is full of oils and butters, we do want to help to protect it. So I'm going to add in my vitamin E, which will act as an antioxidant and stop all these oils from oxidizing and getting that rancid smell. So we've got our vitamin E. And then finally, the last thing I like to put in mine is a little bit of emulsifying wax, which I mentioned the reasons for at the beginning of this video. So let me get that one in. Alright, so now that we've got everything into the pot, I'm going to go and put it on the heat and very, very gently melt this all down. If you are doing this in the microwave, make sure to do it in those sort of 30 to 40 second bursts, depending upon the size that you're doing, and always stir in between so you don't get pockets of heat. You don't want these oils to overheat and then lose all the really good properties that you're going to get out of the oils. But let's go and get this onto the stove top. Okay, so all of our oils and butters are pretty much melted down, apart from that little chunk of cocoa butter. But with a little bit of a stir in here, the residual heat is going to continue melting that down without overheating the whole lot. I'm going to leave it sit here until it pretty much becomes solid again. Alright, it is the next day. This is set up solid in the pot. There is a little bit of softness to it, but it is still nice and firm. I do not recommend putting this into the fridge or freezer while this is hot to speed down that cooling process. I do recommend just being patient. Once it's got down to this sort of room temperature firmness, that is when you can maybe put it in the fridge for about half an hour just to make it go really, really hard, because the next thing we're going to do is we're going to whip it, and that whipping sensation is going to cause a little bit of heat, and it is going to make it melt a little bit. So putting it in the fridge now is fine. You don't want to do it when it is still hot, because putting it in hot, you're going to build condensation up on the edges of your container or on the lid, and that water is going to get into the product. And this product does not have a preservative in it. It should not come into contact with water, so it doesn't need it, and therefore if we do get condensation in this mix, it's going to pose problems later on. So just be patient and let it come down to that room temperature solid mass before you do think about putting it in the fridge to get that little bit of extra work time. What we're going to do is we're going to whip this. Now, because it does have the emulsifying wax in, this is a little bit different to most other body butter recipes. It's not going to get really light, airy, and double in size. But if you don't whip this, there actually is a real obvious difference when it comes time to actually using it. In the instructions, I do say to have a go at it before you whip it, like take a little bit out and try it before you whip it, and then try a little bit after you whip it. And you can actually feel that it has aerated and it feels really good on the skin. You just don't get that sort of expanding. The really good thing about that is normally with a whipped body butter, when you start whipping it, if you whip one batch for longer than another, you end up with jars that don't fill up the same. Some are over, some are under, and that sort of thing. At least with this recipe, you know, because it's not going to increase in volume, you're always going to have the correct amount in your batch to fill your jars up with. I've actually made a bit of a master batch in here, minus the, we're going to put in some tapioca starch in here and the fragrance. What I'm now going to do is split off enough to make my first fragrance, and then we're going to add in the final bits of the ingredients, give it a bit of a whip, and then we'll pot it up. You can either use a stand mixer, this is the bowl of my stand mixer to do this, or you can use a handheld mixer one. This is a fairly small batch, it's easier for me to clean this, so I'm going to use my hand mixer. I'm going to first of all mix in the tapioca starch. We're going to start getting it all whipped and aerated. I'm then going to add in my fragrance and my mica and give it another mix before popping it into our piping bags. So you'll know when this has had a good mix because it actually goes into a real pale creamy color, and you actually feel a little bit of a difference while you are mixing. It will suddenly feel actually quite stiff while you are mixing it. The other reason I do like to use my hand mixer is because it gives me that sort of opportunity to really get in the bowl and give it a really good mix, making sure that I've picked up all of the uncolored body butter from the bottom and making sure that we have got nice even distribution of fragrance and color. That is looking pretty good. I'm going to get it into the piping bag. So when I do the piping of my body butter, I'm fairly quick at doing it. I don't mess around with fancy piping tips, though you can. The issue I have with those fancy piping tips is when you tend to get your product deflate. Because this doesn't aerate like other body butters, there's not as much problem with this one actually deflating, but it will deflate if you're using those really fancy piping tips to get the pretty pictures and things. I find just piping it into the container like so, you get a decent amount into the container. It doesn't deflate and always looks good. I'm putting mine into some aluminium tins, and I have got links in the recipe as to where I buy them here in Australia, for those that do grab that recipe there. And because there's no water in here, I've never had a problem with putting them into the aluminium tins. I would not recommend putting this into glass because it is very easy to drop glass jars when you've got greasy hands. So if you are being environmentally conscious, these tins are a really good way of doing it. So I'm going to get the rest of these smells all done up the same way. Then we're going to go and get our labels to go on the top. Okay, so that is the first batch of my body butters for the season made. I actually do have another batch on the go at the moment, which are going to have some essential oil blends in, and also a few more of these ones. You may have noticed I actually potted up more of this tropical than you actually saw me label, and that was because as I was potting these up, I had a customer walk in and she saw that we're making the body butters, got really excited and asked if she could take a couple with her there and then. Now normally I would let my body butters sit for at least 24 hours before putting them out on the shelf, just to make sure they do firm up. So she was sent home with strict instructions not to use it for 24 hours. And after 24 hours it does actually start to thicken up. This is my little tester pot. It does actually start to thicken up, but it's still really nice and soft, and it actually is moussey, even though it doesn't aerate like other body butters. It does still have that really moussey consistency, and it rubs into the skin beautifully. You can see that sort of sheen from the body butters, but it doesn't have that usual greasy feel that a body butter does have. And if you have put it on your arms and legs, you can now go and wash your hands and know that it's going to come off your hands as well. But honestly, it's not that unbearable for people who don't like those greasy products. So that is how I make my whipped body butter. As I said, the recipe is available to purchase over on the Pimp My Soap. If you're interested in the Patreon, check out the description box down below to see what level to join at what time of the, or at the time of year according to when you're seeing this video. It does get complicated. I do move the recipes around on Patreon, mainly to actually protect patrons who have been with me for a number of years and have paid hundreds of dollars for all the recipes I have shared. I know some people get really upset and leave nasty exit reviews about it, but it is to prevent people coming along and paying $5 and taking 3 years worth of recipes, when I've had patrons who have been with me for 3 years and have paid in excess of $300 for those recipes. So they do get moved around to protect my current patrons. So please understand that, and please be aware of that when you are joining as well. But that is it. I'm going to go and make my essential oil ones. I hope you've enjoyed coming along with me as I made the whipped body butter. And for my customers, this should be on the website very soon, and it's in the shop now. Until the next video comes out, I hope you have a good one, and I will see you then. Bye.